There wasn't a noise in the forest. There were smells. Wood smoke filled the air in every season because it wasn't just for heat but to cook as well. The smell of oak for long fires, pine for short and fast and hot fires, the smell of bread, and sometimes, if they were lucky and had honey or rock, sugar to pulverize in a sack with a hammer, sweet pie, the odor of stew cooking in the cast iron pot over an outside fire, or an iron kettle hung in the fireplace, the scent flying up through the chimney and out over the ground as the wind moved the smoke around. There was the tang of manure, stacked in back of small shed-like barns to age before it was put on gardens, horse and cow and chicken manure from their farm and other farms. So many smells swirled by the same wind throughout the small valley. Their valley was like a huge bowl nestled in the hills in far western Pennsylvania. Here lived, and had always lived, Samuel Leigh Smith, aged 13, with his father Olin and his mother Abigail, parents whom Samuel did not always understand but whom he loved. They read to him about the world beyond from their prized books, all the long winter nights with tallow candles burning while they sat by the fireplace. They read aloud to each other. At first he listened as they took turns. Later, he read to himself and knew the joyous romp of words on paper. He read all the books they had in the cabin and then books from other cabins in the valley so that he could know more and more of a world found only in his imagination and dreams. Can't we do that too when we read? To the east lay the faraway world of enormous cities and the great sea in Europe and ancient Rome and darkest Africa and the mysterious lands of the Asias and so many people they couldn't be counted. All kinds of different people with foreign languages and their knowledge of strange worlds. To the east lay polished shoes and ornate clothing and formal manners and enormous wealth. His mother would spin tales for him about his cultured men who wore carefully powdered wigs and dipped snuff out of little silver snuff boxes, and beautiful women dressed in gowns of silk and satin with swirling petticoats, and they danced in the great houses and exclusive salons of London and Paris. Now, the deer stepped out. It stood in complete profile, not 30 yards away. Samuel held his breath. He waited for it to turn away, look around in caution. When it did, he raised the rifle and cocked the hammer, pulling it back as quietly as he could, the sear dropping in with a soft snick. The rifle had 2 triggers, a set trigger that armed a second, front trigger, and made it so sensitive that a mere brush released the handle. He moved his finger from the set trigger and laid it next to, but didn't touch, the hair trigger. Then he settled the German silver blade of the front sight into the tiny notch of the rear sight and floated the tip of the blade sight until it rested just below the shoulder of the young buck, directly over its heart. A half second, no, a quarter second passed. Samuel couldn't touch the hair trigger now, and the hammer would drop. The flint would scrape the metal frizzen, kicking it out of the way and showering sparks down on the powder in the small pan, which would ignite and blow a hot jet of gas into the touch hole in the side of the barrel of the rifle, setting off the charge, propelling the small 40 caliber ball down the bore. Before the buck heard the sound of the rifle, the ball would pass through the heart and out the other side of the deer, killing it. And yet he did not pull the trigger. He waited. Part of a second, then a full second, and another. The deer turned, saw him, standing there. With a convulsive explosion of muscle, it jumped straight in the air. It landed running and disappeared in the trees. The whole time Samuel had not really been thinking of the deer, but what lay east of what they called civilization. He eased the hammer of the rifle down to the first notch of the sear, a safety position, and lowered the weapon. Oddly, he wasn't disappointed he'd not taken the deer, though the fresh meat would have been nice roasted over the hearth. He'd killed plenty of deer, sometimes 10 or 15 a day, so many they could not possibly eat all the meat. He often shot them because the deer raided the cornfields and had to be killed to save the crops. Most families did not like deer meat anyway. They considered it stringy and tough, and it was often wormy. The preferred meat was boar, or beaver, which were richer and less cordy. This deer would have been nice. They had not had fresh meat in nearly 2 weeks, but it was gone now. He could not stop his wondering about what lay to the east, the world. It was supposed to be a better place than the frontier, with a more sensible way to live, and yet he had learned an ugly truth about the world only the evening before. Those people in the world who were supposed to be civilized, full of knowledge and wisdom and graciousness and wealth and education, were caught in the madness of vicious, bloody war. It didn't make any sense. Samuel started trotting back toward the cabin in an easy, shuffle walk that moved him quietly, and at some speed without wearing out his moccasins. He was lucky to get a month per pair before they were wore through at the heels. He moved without a great deal of effort, his eyes and ears missing very little as he almost flowed through the forest. But his mind was still on the man who had brought the sheet of paper the night before. All right, then it says communication. So after each chapter, there's like a part that tells you about the times of this era. And it's going to help us kind of understand the book a little more. So remember, the chapter ends with the man that brought the piece of paper. Communication. In the year 1776, the fastest form of travel for any distance over 30 or 40 miles was by ship. With steady wind, a sailing vessel could clock 100 to 200 miles a day for weeks on end. A horse could cover 30, maybe even 40 miles a day, although not for an extended period of time without breaking down. At best, coaches could do 100 miles in a 24-hour day by changing horses every 10 or 15 miles, but only if the roads were in good shape, which they almost never were. A man could walk 20 or 30 miles a day, faster for short periods, but always depending on conditions of land, weather, and footgear. 15 miles a day was standard. So there was no fast and dependable way to transmit information in those years. No telegraph, no telephone, no internet, no texting, no overnight delivery services. It might take 5 or 6 days for knowledge of an important event to move just 10 miles, carrying by a traveler on foot. Settlements were 12 to 15 miles apart, and information was carried by hand from person to person on paper, or in most cases, shared by word of mouth. Okay, so we know that there was no telephone, there was no sending mail through email or sending information even through telephone. So he is in the woods and he's hunting and he misses the deer. And he's not disappointed about it, but the reason he misses the deer is his mind is preoccupied. He's thinking about something else. And he refers to the civilization. In the book, it has it around quotation marks, because from his perspective, the people that live west of them, they're civilized. They don't live in the forest. They're not rough, and they don't hunt that he knows of. They are civilized. They live a life of luxury, so to speak. But I get the feeling that when the man brought the paper, his ideas about these people from the civilization, that they're not exactly what he thought. So right now for your response, I want you to think about what is it that this man told him that has him so preoccupied. Think about the time era, what's going on. I told you he was in Pennsylvania. The American Revolution has begun, but it's not where he is. So think about why he was so preoccupied. All right, tomorrow I'll read you chapter 2 and we'll have another point to ponder. I will be contacting parents today to set up a Zoom account for you. Hopefully tomorrow we're going to have a meeting where we can all see each other and talk to each other. So I'm very excited about that. Have a great day, guys. I miss you so, so much. Don't forget to respond to this text in either paper or on Google Classroom. See you later, guys. Bye.